Broadcasting from the 72nd floor of First Canadian Place in the heart of Toronto's financial district, this is #Finance, the podcast that profiles innovative entrepreneurs and thought leaders operating in the public markets. Presented to you by the CSE, the Exchange for Entrepreneurs.
Hi, I'm Grace Pedota with the CSE, and we're here for another episode of #Finance. We're filming from the top of First Canadian Place with Joe Voss, Managing Director of Leafly. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. And just a little bit of a background. We got introduced through Jay Rosenthal, founder of Business of Cannabis. We did a recent media coverage of his conference at the Steam Whistle Brewery. And he was kind enough to introduce me to Scott, who could coordinate you coming.
Oh, that's great. We love Jay. We love Business of Cannabis. And we were actually at the Cannabis and Technology Conference as well.
Yeah, it was great.
It was a good event.
Yeah, there was massages at his conference. It was wild.
I missed that.
Yeah, free massages. I was like, wow, that's new.
Yeah, I think it's a natural tie into cannabis,
it's very
right?
Jay. It's very Jay to have like that quirk at the at his conference. But yeah, so I just kind of wanted to bring you onto the podcast because, first of all, you are a female leader in cannabis, which I find is really remarkable. We're seeing a lot of female leaders in cannabis, which is really great to see. And also, I wanted to talk to you more about Leafly because I definitely am a user of Leafly. I go on for a lot of information, and I just find it so easy to read and educate myself. So I wanted to bring you in and chat with you about it.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're here for. Awesome.
And so if you kind of want to tell our viewers about Leafly for the viewers that don't know already.
Sure. Yeah. So Leafly is the world's largest cannabis platform. We in Canada have about 7.7, almost 8 million users who are using the platform every year. We help people learn about cannabis. We help people shop for legal products in the marketplace. And we help people buy, which really means, I think, helping them find legal products with legal retailers within this space. So the goal is always, get educated, learn as much as you can so you can make confident decisions, and then go to a legal retailer.
Exactly.
So our core goal is really empowering our users to understand cannabis.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I had landed on the website initially, and because you have great SEO. You come up right away.
That's true. I mean, that happens when you've been around for 10 years. So we were founded in 2010 in Seattle. So, it's been a long, I think, journey through the cannabis industry. And when you're sitting on, let's call it 10,000 pieces of evergreen content, I think SEO is just a kind of a natural thing that happens. But yeah, we're very lucky. And I think we're able to leverage a lot of those learnings and content in Canada as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's so user friendly, and you guys have these new images of strains of cannabis that
our new cannabis guide. And maybe I can share a little bit more about that. Yeah. I mean, it's really exciting. So over the last year, we've been working on retooling the platform, really diving into data. So I work with my colleague is Dr. Nick Jikomes, who has been spearheading this effort. He's a brilliant scientist, very passionate about cannabis and education. And over the course of the past couple of years, he discovered that we just, we have a lot more science and a lot more data at our fingertips. And so Leafly has essentially moved away from thinking around the indica sativa binary. So we've just launched a new platform, in essence, that helps people understand the plant in a better way. So what we're doing is we're vetting labs. We're working with labs all across North America, and we're taking that data and we're using a generative tool, generative technology, to create a visual language to help people understand strains, which is really amazing. I think it was definitely a huge undertaking for the entire team. It's also, a huge departure from where we have been historically. Not to say that indica sativa is wrong, but more to say we have a lot more knowledge now. We believe this is where the industry is going, and we think consumers are going getting smarter every day. They're demanding more information. And I think there's a huge piece of a huge component of it is transparency, right? People want to know what is in the product, what is in the strain that they're looking for, which is obviously a public safety issue as well. You're seeing with the vapey crisis. So we really want to make sure that we're giving as much data and as much information as we can to the end users, so they're just making smart choices and getting positive outcomes.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, they remind me of like those adult coloring books, like the
That's such a great reference. I've gotten Snowflake. Kaleidoscope. That is such a great reference.
I really want you guys to make coloring books.
Yeah. I mean, awesome. Who knows? Yesterday I was talking with the content team about just all of the like kind of print on demand opportunities. I can imagine a world where we have wrapping paper, or you actually might be able to create your favorite strain through our cannabis guide, and create your own wearable merch. So I think the marketing opportunity is pretty immense.
Oh yeah. And you guys kind of have already revolutionized content in cannabis, I think. Yeah. Like, because it's just, like you said, now the user can go in and, find out exactly what is in the strain and then be able to take accordingly. So
for sure. I think, and just to kind of add on that too, it's about, THC content, CBD content, and terpene content, which, we're still learning a lot more about. Truthfully, there's a lot of research that still needs to happen, but it's kind of day one, the way I look at it. You launch a tool, you launch a technology, a platform, and it's iterative. So we've launched with this kind of first version, which, is pretty amazing in and of itself, but the tools and tech are just going to get smarter over time.
Yeah. Are you guys looking to, first of all, what is the profile of the average user on your website? Because I know there's like a lot of companies will put out a cannabis report and they will refer to, early onset users or.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the things that I find is most fascinating is to watch, let's call it search trends. So last year, as we were leading up to legalization, and we've seen this in rec legal states, our traffic doubled. I mean, it doubled in nature, and that was pretty interesting. So we know that there's an awareness and an interest in cannabis. I would say some of the most searched articles or search content leading up to legalization were really around the Cannabis 101 stuff. What is THC? What is CBD? What happens if I get too high? How do I roll a joint? Kind of a lot of things that were associated to flower and that rudimentary and foundational educational piece. I think, our user, we have many different types of users, so it's hard to break it down to just one. I would say, the one trend that I see is people who are looking for information on wellness, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think we've got obviously adult rec, which is live and legal now. We've got medical, which has been around for quite some time. And then you've got this sort of swath in the middle that is people who are looking for cures to common ailments, which would be, how do I sleep better? How do I, reduce my anxiety? How do I, have an elevated experience, at my local grocery store if I'm, going out on a Saturday morning? So there's like little, I think, commonalities between a lot of the search trends that we're starting to see, which is really interesting when you start to look at, the CBD opportunity, which is obviously a huge thing in the States. Here in Canada, THC and CBD are categorized the same. So we'll see what happens with potential new regulations. I know that there's a consultation out right now, but that's also a huge opportunity.
And I did not know this, that THC and CBD are classified as the same thing in Ontario?
In Canada. So the difference being that in the States, they view CBD as just a separate regulatory item. Mm-hmm. In Canada, it's the same. So you're buying CBD and THC products in retail in the same environment. It's the same type of classification. Oh, wow. Obviously, they're very different in nature. One is a psychoactive, one is not. But they, they live on the shelf together.
Yeah, no, there's so much talk around, and this is probably just more of a personal question than me asking for like data, but there's so much talk around CBD going into like wellness, like actual like chiropractors and massage therapists having to use it and it kind of being like medical.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that we always urge our consumers to think about is, again, think about what's in your products. Because one, I think CBD has some incredible healing properties. We know that based on the science that has come out. It's anti-inflammatory. There are so many pros to potentially incorporating that into your wellness routine or your medical routine if your medical advisor advises to do so. But really, I think people need to be aware about what's in the product because, people are selling CBD like snake oil in the States. And I think it's really important to understand what you're either putting on your skin or taking in your body.
Exactly. Yeah. And like you kind of talked about with James Black listings development here when you first came in was like it's kind of like the skincare products that we see, shoppers versus Kiehl's, where Kiehl's, they're dressed up like doctors. And it's more of like when you go in, you feel like you're talking to like a dermatologist.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity, I think, from a retail perspective to differentiate. I would love to get to a place in this market where we have, specialty CBD stores or, niche retail environments that are catered towards a certain type of consumer, whether it's, female focused or, those are just two examples. But I just think there's an immense opportunity to help people understand in a more in-depth way. And just to kind of talk about that, I can also, imagine a world not so long from now where, Leafly, as an example, is fully integrated into a retail environment. We have this flower system. The goal is really to drive mass adoption. We're going top down from, let's call it the LPs and the retailers and consumer up to have a language that is, consistent and not fragmented and that everybody is using, which is what we've seen in the past with Leafly, right? We had this incredible periodic table. It was very simple to use. And people just knew it. It's, red, green, and purple, indica, sativa, and hybrid. So it's really kind of it was a new take on, bringing the visual language to life in a very exciting way.
Yeah. And then that kind of leads into my next question that I wanted to ask you where, initially I kind of took the stance where I was going to ask you more about how you can help cannabis companies market, which kind of we were just talking about. Yeah. But then we had started with how you kind of help the consumer, which is great. And I love that. But how are you going to help cannabis companies market? Now the market's kind of died down and people are in. They're in. And now cannabis companies are, having pressure where it's like they have to show the results. They have to show numbers.
Yesterday in the news, we saw, Hexo is laying off 200 people, which is a huge chunk of their workforce. PAX laid off, I think, 25% of their workforce. So I think it's become very real very fast. And, there was some really excitable forecasts and projections that were thrown out there early on. And obviously there, the sentiment leading into 10/17 last year was immense. A lot of investment poured into marketing, especially pre-October. Tweed is a great example, Canopy. Big budgets, lots of spending with out of home. They really wanted to move the dial on that brand buy-in because they knew the prohibitions would come into place, which is a huge piece of it. I think, I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge for brands to differentiate given the prohibitions. And that's one thing that I hope we start to move the needle on from a regulatory perspective sooner rather than later, because I think we're going to lose our competitive edge if not. And if I'm a brand and I obviously want to be able to perform and have a two-way conversation with my consumer, some of those restrictions kind of need to be alleviated so that I can, create experience, whether it's educational or art or, actually just straight up marketing. So, I think we will get there. But what we do is really, I think we're basically a conduit to the consumer. So over 100 million people are visiting Leafly year over year. And, that is an immense amount of eyeballs, right? So the way that we try to do that, and, as a former marketer, I think, how are we going to help you? You're probably thinking about your cost per acquisition. In this case, it's kind of two things. One, how do I drive an action or behavior, but also how can we drive someone who is looking for cannabis into the legal framework? So I think it's kind of, we're trying to work with licensed producers, retailers, and kind of ancillary brands on solving some of those things.
Cool.
But also on the other side, working with government to drive awareness and to drive acquisition into the legal framework, which is a huge thing because consumers right now are online. They're trying to crowdsource information and education. And I mean, as we do with every product, right? And so they're trying to essentially hack it together and try to figure out what's going to work. And it's very much like dating. You don't know what's going to happen. And so, it's really, it's all about helping them understand what is legal, what is not. And that's why we only work with licensed producers and retailers, because there are players out there that are, I think, fostering the illicit market, and consumers don't know any better. They don't, perhaps, my mom's best friend down the street doesn't know that mail order is not a thing, is legal.
Yeah.
So I think, it's all about, I think, obviously educating on cannabis, but helping them understand, what the entire framework looks like so that they're, really getting safe product and getting the right type of tools to just make better choices.
That's so interesting. That's a really interesting concept. Yeah, because there is a lot of black market stuff out there.
Absolutely. And the internet is vast.
Yeah. I mean, the cannabis industry itself is like the Wild West. Like people kept saying that at a conference last week. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. Like, this is the only panel discussion I've ever seen where like people in the audience were answering the questions for the panelists because they just didn't know. And panelists were totally comfortable with that. They're like, does someone know the answer? And, and everyone's collectively learning together, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But then there's also false information where I did go see people in the they were in black market cannabis industry, and like they were doing a quiz and just like their answers were wrong about like legal things in cannabis. So it's good that we have something like Leafly to educate ourselves and like know the facts, because there really, really isn't anywhere to go right now.
Yeah, I agree. Right? I think my goal is to just be the source of truth for everybody. And obviously to solve some of the challenges that we're seeing across the market. Like we want to drive value for our partners. We want to be useful to our users. We want them to, be surprised and delighted when they use the cannabis guide tool, and then be able to use things like Pickup as an example. So in Alberta, we have a product called Pickup, which is essentially a click and collect. So you're able to use Leafly online. So we have a great partnership with Spirit Leaf as an example, and a number of other retailers in the space. But we did launch with Spirit Leaf in Alberta. And so you're able to go to your Leafly menu online, do a bit of browsing and showrooming on what products you want while leveraging our data and our education. And then you can reserve your cannabis ahead of time in store. And so I think from my perspective, we want to be able to solve some of the challenges around the attrition that we're seeing from the legal market. So if I'm a consumer, and I'm speaking also for myself here, I have an expectation around the technology and the tools that are going to be available to me so that I can just live my life and make those choices and have this naturally integrate into how I would be buying any other product. Challenging, obviously, with the regulatory framework, but we're getting there. BC is a great example. So a couple of weeks ago, we noticed that the regulations did not allow private retailers to show cannabis information on their websites, and that would be a product information or pricing. And actually, just last week, they updated the regulations, so now private retailers have a more competitive edge in that market. So, we're starting to see, I think, a really great two-way dialogue with the regulators and the distribution boards themselves. So it's positive. Like, we are making gains. It's just, I think we're not moving as fast as we would like.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes fast isn't always good, right?
True. That is true.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Good things take longer.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And it's always easier to take back rather than enforce. So,
exactly.
I think the general population has put a lot of faith into the government, and they actually have done a great job of rolling this out.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm a huge fan. Like I said, I downloaded the app like last week, and it's amazing. Like, it's so fast. Like, if I have any questions or I want to like research anything, or and like look up any articles, like latest news. It's just right there at my fingertips, which is really, really awesome.
That's great. I love to hear that the technology works. And that it's something that you use all the time. I think, I even am guilty. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I'm often showing the app to my mom or, friends up at the cottage who are, all coming out. We call them, like I almost say, it's like a coming out party, right?
Totally is.
Where they're saying, oh, I've been doing this for years, or, I've been baking forever. And it's so nice to finally talk about this. And that's great because we have to talk about it. Yeah. I think it's just an essential piece of the whole legalization rollout, right?
Yeah,
Break
exactly.
the stigma.
Yeah, exactly. There is actually a really great group called Breaking Stigma in Toronto, which is they're a really cool group and bunch. And that's one of the biggest things is literally breaking that stigma because so many people, like you heard James say when you came in, he was like, when you smoke cannabis, you turn into a zombie. And just saw your face, you're like, I
don't necessarily agree with that. But I mean, I guess it depends what product you're consuming.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not the right one for you.
It's like that sativa indica conversation, which you guys are doing your best to drive people away from. But yeah, just lastly, to finish up, because I could talk all day about this subject, but I won't keep you all day. But you said that you bike, and so I just wanted to know more about that.
I love biking. So I kind of got into it because my boyfriend, my husband now at the time, was abstractly talking about biking, and I was like, okay, I love this guy. I think I should probably get him something amazing for his birthday. So for his 30th birthday, I threw him a surprise birthday party, and then got him his first carbon fiber road bike, which was, cool. Really exciting. But I'm also the type of person that doesn't want to be left behind. I'm notorious for FOMO. And I also love adrenaline sports. I lived on the West Coast for a long time. I did a lot of ski touring and snowboarding and backcountry. And I love, I love a good rush. So I used to downhill mountain bike out at Silver Star and up in Whistler. Wow. And it was just, we can't do that here. Obviously, we don't have the elevation. No. But it's just a great sport. Yeah. And so I, for a couple of years, did a women's specific cycling group. So I would take women out and we would do kind of a beginner to intermediate ride. Wow. And then also, just help them with skills, right? It's like, how do I change a tire? How do I ride in a Peloton? How do I do a Centurion and actually make it through feeling like a human being?
Yeah, there's so many questions.
But I think it's just, I love biking because it's a great workout. It gives you that adrenaline rush. You can go farther, faster. It's good on your knees. Yeah. And it's also really social. There's nothing better than like stopping in and grabbing an espresso and then hightailing it home.
Yeah, no, those are all the reasons why I love biking too. Went mountain biking for the first time last weekend, and it was intense. Like going downhill, you have to be so careful with your front and back like brakes because you will like literally flip over.
I have a tip. Okay. In your mind, when you're going down the hill, always look at look 20 feet ahead. So pick your line, but also right is rear. So as you're going down the hill, think about using your rear brake as opposed to your front brake. So I find that's a trick I trigger. I'm always going, okay, right is rear. So that way, if I do have to slam on my brakes, I'm not going to topple over.
Yeah. Someone said it's like a balance between the two, but I really feel like you don't want to slam on the front brake like at all.
That has the potential to be a negative outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for the bike tips, and thank you so much for coming in and talking to me and the audience about Leafly and how it can benefit consumers in learning.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Where can we find Leafly?
Well, I think first and foremost, go to leafly.ca where, there's so much information on there. And the new cannabis guide is really, obviously, it solves a lot of the challenges that people are experiencing, but it's also really pretty. It's a beautiful design. So credit to the team there. You can also find us on social at Leafly. Very simple, short and sweet for all of your cannabis questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
We're social here at the CSE. Each and every day we'll keep you up to date on trending topics that investors are talking about, such as cannabis, blockchain, and esports. Follow daily CSE news and events on your favorite social media platform: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You'll find exclusive interviews with leading entrepreneurs from a variety of industries, thought-provoking stories from across the world of finance, and updates from CSE events taking place worldwide. Join the conversation and connect with us today.
it's Grace from the CSC reminding you to make sure to follow us on social media for the latest updates on our listed companies as well as new listing alerts. For more in-depth content, be sure to pick up our free quarterly magazine, Public Entrepreneur, available online at thecsc.com.